Chapter 4. Extreme Isolation. Everyone knew that John's journey was a one-way trip. He had become the most crucial figure in humanity's survival, the lone pioneer tasked with laying the foundation for the future. His mission was not merely about survival. It was about securing the path for those who would follow. His efforts marked a critical step toward the ultimate goal, the construction of the generational ships, humanity's last hope. John's first assignment was monumental: to assemble the scattered modules floating in orbit. The basic modular components of what would become the heart of humanity's greatest endeavor, a space station designed to act as an intermediate step toward the final construction of a much more massive facility. A facility that one day would build the interstellar vessels that would carry mankind to new worlds. But he was alone for that task. Completely, utterly alone. The mission ahead would take at least 3 years, if everything went according to plan. He had the necessary resources to survive: food and oxygen for 4 years, a reliable water supply, and an energy system powered by pre-deployed solar panels and high-capacity batteries. His suit could be recharged indefinitely, and for any unforeseen needs, resupply missions from Earth could be arranged. But logistics were not the real challenge. The greatest enemy he would face wasn't the vacuum of space, nor the precarious construction of the station. It was isolation. John's lifeline to humanity was instant quantum communication, that revolutionary discovery that had rendered AI surveillance obsolete. The AI might have ruled Earth's surface, but it lacked the creativity to conceive of ideas beyond its logical scope. It didn't know the quantum entanglement instant communication existed, and it never would. The decision to send him alone had not been made lightly. Human life was too valuable to risk. There were contingency plans to send additional personnel, but at this stage, risking another life was deemed reckless. And so, John worked. His first task was to assemble the habitat ring, the initial living space for the next wave of travelers. Engineers had meticulously calculated the dimensions so that the station, once fully assembled, would spin at just the right speed to generate a weak artificial gravity, about 10% of Earth's gravity, slightly below that of the Moon. But this was not a long-term solution. It was merely a stepping stone. The ultimate plan involved the construction of a second space station with a much larger ring, where the generational spaceships would be built. This station would generate up to 80% of Earth's gravity, the minimum threshold scientists believed necessary for long-term human survival in space. But the work was painstakingly slow. Upon arrival, John found that only a third of the habitat modules were in place. 200 out of the planned 600. Connecting each module took a full day, and every link had to be meticulously verified to ensure complete insulation, structural integrity, and seamless electrical connectivity. A single mistake could spell catastrophe. There was no room for second chances. Rescue missions were not an option. The 6 central modules, which would serve as the foundation for the station's rotating gravity engine, took even longer to assemble. Each one required an additional day of testing, ensuring they could withstand prolonged centrifugal force without failure. It took John 2 years to complete the initial ring. He communicated with the underground base as frequently as possible to combat his feelings of isolation, but it wasn't enough. At first, the sheer workload kept his mind occupied. There was no time to dwell on loneliness, when every hour was consumed by problem-solving, physical labor, and safety checks. But as time wore on, the silence grew heavier. John missed them. He missed waking up to Emma's warm smile, the way she reached for him in the morning, how her heartbeat felt against his skin. He missed Ellie. His little girl was growing up without him. By now, she was a young woman, and he wasn't there to see it. He wasn't there for her victories, her struggles, her laughter. At first, he tried to hide it. He forced himself to joke, to smile when he spoke to them over comms. But isolation was a slow, creeping poison. It seeped into his bones, into his voice. By the end of the second year, everyone could hear the change. John stopped joking. He spoke less. His responses became robotic, short, efficient, devoid of the warmth that had once been his defining trait. The command team monitored him closely, aware that mental deterioration was as much a threat as a life support failure. But it was Emma who saw it first, before John himself even realized it. She knew he was fading, and she wasn't about to let that happen. She was going to do something about it. Emma stood before the underground council, her heart pounding, her mind unwavering. She had made her decision. Beside her, a team of psychiatrists and psychologists presented their findings, undeniable evidence of John's deteriorating mental state. The report left no room for doubt. Prolonged isolation was taking its toll. And while John remained functional, the signs of depression were growing more pronounced. The council listened in silence, their faces grave. When the presentation concluded, the head of the council finally spoke.
We recognize the severity of the situation. What solutions do you propose to mitigate this mental strain?
Emma took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her voice was clear, resolute, unshakable.
The solution is simple. I'm going to him.
The room erupted. Voices clashed in alarmed whispers and outright protests. Some council members stood, exclaiming their disbelief. Others shook their heads in silent refusal.
We are not risking another life unless we have proof that John is incapable of performing his duties,
one of them argued. Emma remained firm.
I know my husband,
she declared, her voice slicing through the commotion.
I know what he needs, and I will be there for him, no matter what. I've already been preparing for this for the last 6 months, training in every critical area necessary for survival in space. Before the year's over, you will have a rocket ready for me.
The protests intensified. The council chamber was now in full chaos, people shouting over one another, scandalized by her audacity. Emma wasn't making a request. She was demanding it. The head of the council finally raised his hand, calling for silence. The voices fell away, though the tension remained thick in the air. She turned to Emma, her expression carefully measured.
Emma, please,
she said, her voice softer now.
Give us time to analyze all possible options. Sending another human into space is not a decision we make lightly. I understand what you are going through truly. But our primary responsibility is the survival of our species.
She exhaled, looking at the other members.
The council will convene in private. We will deliver our decision tomorrow.
With that, the session adjourned. That night, the council met again, this time with their top experts in psychology, engineering, and mission operations. The discussion was grim. The specialists confirmed what Emma had already stated. John's mental strain was real. And worse, there was no precedent for this. No human had ever endured such prolonged isolation in deep space. No one knew how fast his condition might deteriorate. He was strong. But everyone has a breaking point, and they were terrified they wouldn't recognize his until it was too late. The next morning, as the council gathered once more, Emma stood at attention, surrounded by other members of the underground community. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides, but she showed no hesitation, no fear. The head of the council took a deep breath before speaking.
After careful consideration, we cannot ignore the impact of John's isolation. His psychological well-being is vital to the success of this mission. Ignoring this issue could jeopardize everything. Therefore, we have decided to approve your request.
A hush fell over the room.
However,
she continued, his tone firm,
you will spend the remainder of the year in intensive training. A team of experts will oversee your preparation, physically, mentally, and technically. If, at any point, they determine that you are not ready, we will send a backup astronaut in your place and...
Her gaze met hers.
We must play it safe, Emma. I hope you understand.
Emma didn't hesitate.
I understand.
She straightened her shoulders, her expression unwavering.
Don't worry, I'll be ready.